My name's Chris. I'm going to be a host for the next couple of hours. This session works in two halves. So the first half, I'm going to ask our lovely panel a load of really easy, noddy questions, just to set the scene so that you guys know all about them, their experiences, their perspectives, where they're coming at things. And then your job in the second half is to ask them questions. So I'll just realised I don't even have to do the roaming mic because there's mics everywhere, so that's good. So we'll go around the room and get questions. So my ask of you to avoid the really awkward silences, it's not awkward for me, I'm fine with it, but for everybody else in the room, through the first hour, if something comes to you, if you just jot it down, and then we can have a load of really good questions in the second half. So we'll start with questions for me for now. We'll take a break. During the break, we will put the recording on mute so that your networking conversations aren't recorded, and we'll go from there. Super. Right. Okay. So we'll start with introductions then. So I'm Chris. I am, I guess, currently still Managing Director of and Digital in Leeds, but I'm on gardening leave. So today it's just nice to be out of the house and seeing people and talking to grown-ups because I'm sick of talking to my children. So yeah, I'm going to ask the questions for the first hour and then sort of moderate the second, and we'll go down the line and do quick introductions if you don't mind.
Yeah, my name's John Hughes. I'm also on gardening leave till next Friday. But I'm on gardening leave from being the Chief Growth Officer at Vintage Cash Cow. And before that, I was co-founder and Chief Strategy Officer at the Modern Milkman.
Hi, I'm Chris Crooks. I'm Chief Technology Officer at Interactive Investor. It's lovely to have you all here today. Sam asked to host in our new office we've moved into about a month ago, so it's really good to have everybody here. I've been with Interactive Investor for about 15 years now, doing various different roles through that time, and joined the exec committee at the beginning of 2023.
2 months into product and UX role at Domino's Pizza. So oddly, I spend a lot of time talking about pizza toppings, chicken, cream egg cookies. It's all a little bit awkward when it gets to about 11:30 and you're sort of getting a bit hungry at that point. I've been in product for a really long time now. I was sort of reflecting, it's about 14, 15 years. Always working for like big e-commerce brands. So before this, I was at PLT and Boohoo Group. And then before that, I spent 9 years at Walmart working just over the road in Asda, covering grocery home shopping, George.com, and did some time in UX as well. It's lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
Cool. Hi, I'm Luke, and I work for Pharmacy2. I've been there since January. I'm the technical director there for our technology delivery space. So quite new, quite fresh. My background is primarily in delivery and strategy, so don't ask me any technical questions about servers or APIs. But I've been in the industry for about 15, 16 years, probably spent most of my time in retail at Tesco. So I learned a lot there, and then progressed into manufacturing with Mitsubishi Electric. And then I'll dive into technology, into consultancy, where I learned a lot about software engineering and system integration. So that is kind of my background. And again, looking forward to being here and listening to some questions that you guys have got.
Thank you very much. So before I start asking these guys some questions, it's often useful just to get a lay of the land of the room, see where we're at. So if just through show of hands, please, who in the room in the organisation they're working at the moment works predominantly in a project-based approach as opposed to a product? It's probably about 50-50.
Put your hand up, Rich.
Yeah. Who in the room has Prince 2 certification? Anyone want to admit who got it first? There's probably some quite dusty certificates out there somewhere, I imagine. And who has DSM, CSM, any of the more agile-based certifications? Okay, so it seems to be a pretty even spread across the room. Who in their current organisation uses the term Wagile? Cool. Okay. Right. This is going to be interesting then. So we'll start with some questions and we'll just go down the panel. So we'll get the panel to answer this one themselves, just so you get an idea of their organisation at the moment, the one that I'm still kind of loosely associated with. So in your organisation at the moment, what is a product defined as? So, you know, different organisations split things. Google will split it up to be in the search bar, right? In others, they might do it by channel. What in your organisation?
It's by tool. So it's by tool. So that's not necessarily obvious outside of the business as well. But within the customer journey, there are about 9 different tools, some of which are still spreadsheets, by the way. So don't say that a spreadsheet can't be a tool. It definitely can. You know, and don't worry about that. A lot of people try to hide them as well, bring them to the fore. Like, the more people know about how these tools are just processes effectively. And it's how you manage that process more than what the technology is to deliver it, I think. So, you know, we are very, like, I would say for me, it's the tool and it's the process that wraps around that tool.
So what kind of tools? What would be an example?
So we have a simple, so we will receive like 1,000 boxes a day from people in the UK that have got their goods in. One tool is the thing that just marks them as checked in.
Right.
Yeah. The next stage of that is when those boxes are opened and they're evaluated. That's a second tool.
Right.
Yeah. There's another tool that then goes on to, like, when they're broken down. You know, all the time these are relayed back to the CRM so that the customers are getting the right notification. That thing there is a tool as well. That's actually very much a tool. That's a third-party tool. But there shouldn't really be any distinction for me between a third-party tool and a tool. They all need to work together, you know, and you will have to do your own development, even if it's just simply relaying webhooks correctly and configuring them to make sure you're doing the right data model works. Third-party tools, integrating them into your tool stack is far more important than, like, most developers give attention to, if I'm totally honest. So,
yeah. Chris, what about yours?
So I don't think we really have a fixed definition. Probably the first thing to say. I think it's changed over time. So when we originally moved into agile methodologies, we broke our squads into channels. So we had a squad of people that looked after our website, we had a squad of people that looked after our mobile application, and we had a squad of people that looked after some of our internal development. As the teams grew, we had to break things down differently. So the way that we've got things structured at the minute is we group a number of different alike customer journeys together, and we have a squad on those journeys. So we have a squad that is responsible for acquisition. So that is getting a new customer through our account opening process. We have a squad that's responsible for activation. So once a customer set up their account, how do we actually get them to fund their account? How do we get them trading? How do we get them transferring assets into the platform? We have a number of servicing squads, so they're responsible for the life cycle of the customer, so managing personal details, viewing their portfolio. We have a trading squad, so our trading journeys are quite complex, so we have a squad that's dedicated to looking at our different trading journeys. And we also have other squads that take care of other journeys. The other thing that we have done, and it leads into some of the conversation of project versus product, we have 2 dedicated squads that are responsible for new propositions. So if we're going to launch a new product into the marketplace, we'll set up a squad, full stack squad, that will develop that product in its entirety, bring it to market, and then they will hand those features off to the other squads once they're in a sort of BAU state. The final product set that we have, we've made a big investment in Salesforce. So we have 3 Salesforce development squads. They're responsible for the different applications that are used by our back office. And again, we kind of group those into similar functions and allow them to take accountability for delivery of that group.
Thank you. Jeff?
Yeah, so I think I've kind of inherited a definition of product, which is channels. So we have app, which is 80% of our digital orders. We have web, and then we have aggregators, so the likes of Jet and Deliveroo, hopefully at some point soon, and Uber Eats. It's quite a small team as well, so I'd love to get to the position you're in, where you've got a little bit more continuity across the full customer journey rather than just in silos, in channels, but it's a place to start. So,
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I like going last, by the way, because I can just steal answers. But the true answer really with pharmacy to you is product's quite embryotic. So it's very fresh. It's not a sort of adoption that's probably hit home yet. And I think if you ask certain people in the business, you know, if we say product, they'll feel that's a product we sell, not necessarily a product that we own in a user journey. So we're on a real big journey at the moment. And I think trying to teach that to a business that's not been, you know, used to that kind of methodology or that skill set is been quite a big challenge since we've been there. And similar to Chris, what you were saying, you know, so when I joined, the team was very much just one big blob of developers, software engineers, people in product roles, and it just didn't work. It was kind of like a resource-based thing, and we've tried to do bit of a transformation or still going through that massive transformation to break it into squads that are probably more channel led again. So you've kind of got the storefront opportunity of where we are, our website, our application, and breaking down those user journeys. And then you've got the fulfillment and the clinical part of our job, because, you know, within the pharmacy market, you know, healthcare is quite big, and the assurance and regulation that goes around it is quite big. You have to adhere to quite a lot. And then we've got an acquisition arm and an M&A space, as well as a kind of partnership space. So breaking that down into those segmented squads has been a big move for us, but it's still very embryonic. So, you know, it's quite a good time for me to come, really. It's been through quite a big change, so I can talk about quite a lot of it. And yeah, so it's quite embryonic for us.
I'm going to ask the next question to you.
Oh,
I've done it.
Shot myself in the foot. Yeah.
Everybody's sort of alluded to or mentioned squads.
Yeah.
What does a squad look like in your organisations? I would assume there's developers in there, but what other roles have you got within them to make up? And is it very regimented in that it is no more than 8 people and it involves these roles, or is it fluid depending on the use case?
I think we've tried to keep it really fluid, to be honest, because I think you need to be a bit agnostic depending on where the need is. So I think if, you know, one of our areas we call the universe squad, which is effectively the storefront, the website side of it, you know, the customer facing initiatives that we've got. And I feel like you need to have the autonomy to move the deck chairs about a bit, really, to where you've got the work, because otherwise if it becomes quite regimented, you can't react as quickly as you need to, or be as proactive as possible. So we kind of have a mixture of front end, back end devs. Want to try and transfer to more full stack, so we can really start to adopt some more robust processes. You've got your quality assurance teams that are in there as well, and they kind of have to be agnostic. And until recently, we had our product roles in those squads, but we don't have them there now. We've kind of been through a bit of a structural change recently that has put them outside of our tech space, which I can touch on in a bit more detail in some of the other questions. But that is kind of the start of our foundation, I think, now, and we need to grow and mature that, because it's very fresh to that delivery model that they've been used to for so long, that we're still learning, we're still trying to grow. So, you know, it is agnostic. We have a mixture of engineers as well as kind of doers and quality assurance people. But yeah, it's been all right so far. Kind of learning from it.
The definition of a squad as such, yeah, there's a lot of variances and recipes for that. I think based on sort of past experience, I think it's sort of at the core of it, it sort of starts really with, for me anyway, as a Scrum team. So you've got your product owner, you've got a Scrum master. Scrum master is a really important role as well. Like, I think that's the first thing to sort of go away when we reduce team sizes, but I think that keeps everything unblocked and able to move forwards. And then you've obviously got developers and QAs. So that's kind of the core of it. But I think depending on what part of what your focus is, whether it's discovery or delivery, that then changes that core. So you might have like sort of more technical architecture teams coming in to consult with the core team. And then as you go through delivery and something's maybe not working out the way you thought it was going to do, you might get sort of dev leads in or something like that. So I think you start off with, I think the core place to start is that sort of Scrum team in my experience. But then, like I say, depending on the mode of delivery you're in, you bring in the right consultants as well.
Thank you, Chris.
I think I would just echo what's been said. Maybe a couple of additional points. So we have a very similar methodology. We have kind of a template of what a squad would look like, and then we adapt that based on what that squad needs to deliver. A couple of other elements that we have implemented more recently. So we have UX design and UX research deployed across our squads as well. Depending on what work's being undertaken, that could be a full-time resource, it could be a part-time resource, depending on what activity they need to do. And outside of the squads, we have a group of principal developers or principal engineers, and they'll be responsible for supporting the squads in terms of their solution design process and kind of design authority over what's being built. But also, if there's a particularly complex thing that we need to deliver, or there's a particularly complex piece of technical debt we need to resolve, they may do the initial design for that and then hand that off into the squads. But I think I agree, you have to be flexible based on what it is that they're being tasked to deliver.
Sure, makes sense.
And you have to be much more flexible when your company is a lot smaller as well and doesn't necessarily have all of those roles. So the way that squad size sounds kind of similar, but it's more where are your skill gaps as well. I think the main things that we'd always do is make sure there are 2 developers, because one developer can go off on his own and build his own solution and no one understands it. But making sure that if you haven't got a UX person, you've at least got somebody that is responsible for acquisition or whatever it is you're trying to do. So it's just putting the right people around, and finding polyglots is quite hard, but making sure you're in them as well if you need to, or somebody with decision-making responsibility can be in them if you're much smaller than like the types of org we're talking about here.
Yeah, absolutely makes sense. So we talked a bit about product. For those of you who, and from now on, please just jump in. We're not going to make you all answer the same questions. For those of you who do projects, what is the decision-making process to go, actually, no, that needs to be a project, and what view are the pros and cons of doing it that way?
Usually a project is when somebody super senior goes and promises a date to somebody else that's super senior, and then everything goes from there. But I think projects definitely have their place. And a few things, like, so recently we've launched a chicken concept at Domino's, and that had supply chain and operational implications. And so the sort of project approach, that sort of more waterfall approach, seemed to work better for something like that. But yeah, usually at the origin, there's a day before we know the scope.
Yeah, well, that'll link into the operational side of the business as well, and the constraints within that.
I think the main thing where it becomes a project and not a product is communication, really. So it's about having to communicate across spans of influence. So what you just mentioned there, where you've got your actual food product team needing to know, like, if suddenly all the chicken went missing, or whatever, like, you've got a huge problem on delivering that project if that's not communicating. So I think that's probably the key differentiator for me between how much communication is needed, how wide is your span of influence before it becomes a project. And based on like my own experience, everything's a project. So it's just they're of relative size. Everybody, like, you can't communicate enough about these things in my experience. But
so we talked about Scrum Masters, Jamie, you mentioned that earlier, around product, and we just talked about what's a product in your different organizations. There were generally two main roles: product owner, product manager. Do you guys have both, one or the other? If you do, what's the difference in your world for those two roles?
I don't mind starting that. I'm actually really interested to hear what everybody else answers for. So we have a unique role here that you tend not to see in the marketplace, but we call a product analyst.
Okay.
So it kind of stems from where our product team came from. So we had a team of business analysts, systems analysts, and we decided that we would invest in those people to form our product team. So our product analysts are both the product owner and the business analyst.
Mm-hmm.
So they are responsible for, within their squad, prioritizing the backlog, but also actually doing some of the low-level requirement capturing as well.
Yeah.
With our squads, we have product managers who are responsible for multiple squads and take a bit more of a strategic lens on what's being delivered, how that's being prioritized across all of the other squads, and how it fits into the business objectives. I definitely think we're starting to hit challenges where we recruit somebody from the marketplace and they don't have all the skills that we need for that role. So some of that moving people around to solve the problem we're having to do. And we definitely still see the need for a traditional business analyst skill set. And it's trying to fit those in amongst the different roles that we've got. So we're quite interested how other people tackle that problem.
Did you find that both the different parts of that job, then you find people that are really good BAs but don't necessarily have product experience, and vice versa?
Vice versa, or you can get some that are good at both. So it's an interesting challenge.
I mean, I'll add to that because it's quite prominent for me going for a bit of a structure change with that. So I'll be careful what I say about BAs because my senior BA is sitting at the back of the room. So
it's been recorded.
But no, I mean, we had like just so many different variations of product managers, product owners. There was a principal or a senior or whatever it was, and they were embedded in the squads, and it didn't make sense, right? They were trying to be strategic, but didn't really know enough about what they were trying to be strategic about, or weren't really in the right place to understand what it was. But then they're also trying to do Scrum elements, right? So you had this weird hybrid of trying to manage delivery as well as trying to be strategic, and it didn't work. So, trying to understand really how do we break the what, when, and how, kind of how to break what does that mean? Why are we doing this? what are we doing and then how are we doing it. And that was what we differentiated between the kind of management and owner part of it. And then that kind of defined to us that actually they don't sit right in our world. They should be out in the world where they're in with the business within the functions that they can support from a product perspective. And that really helped us break that down. I think everyone looks at it slightly differently. They've all got slightly different iterations in different businesses that you go. You know, a lot of people will say, well, a product manager is responsible for a P&L. That isn't always the case, but often that sometimes happens. Like you own the products that you're responsible for and drive that revenue. But I think they've got their purpose if they're focused on the what, why, and how. And that's kind of what we're trying to do now to understand how we can grow that in our space.
Anybody on that, we've got either a product owner, product manager, product analyst who is responsible for a P&L for a particular product. Anyone in the audience? No, it's not entirely surprising. Super, thank you. So when you're forming product teams, and there's different current organisations, you're at different stages of that journey. What are the obvious friction and blockers that you've come across when you've been putting those teams together?
I think one of the things is that there is because product management works so differently depending on the organisation, even the country that you're working in. There's such a variance in the craft, I guess, that there's massively different expectations. So somebody in a CEO position expects something completely different to somebody sat in marketing in a management position. And then even the team themselves have different expectations of the role. And I think you can get I've worked with people before that it's like being a tortured poet, because you know how it should work, but actually trying to like make that happen in the context of your organization is difficult. And I've learned in the different organizations that I've been in. So this time with Domino's, what we've done is we've surveyed like a lot of different stakeholders. I think we've taken like insight from about 30 different stakeholders right across the organization to try and establish what their expectation is, so that we can work out, have we got to educate people? Have we got to demonstrate some stuff to some people? And I think if I was to summarize what we've found is that there is definitely a disconnect, and a lot of the teams think that we're there to just deliver. And that means that we've got a little bit of educating to do across the board, I think, just to sort of set that expectation. And I think the way that we intend to do that is more through not like reading the textbook and reciting what best practice looks like, but more trying to find little pockets of opportunity on a small, low risk scale where we can demonstrate the value. So yeah, that's probably my experience and learnings from like other roles into this one.
I think from my point of view, I think one of the biggest challenges that we've had is organizational design over a squad structure, and probably specifically who's making decisions in given direction.
Yeah.
That's been a real challenge for us, and it's taken us a long time to get to a place where we face less conflict and less challenge, and the team are all rowing in the same direction. So having a squad that's autonomous, but then having line management that sits outside of that might give different direction or different opinion, and you end up kind of going around in circles with nobody actually making a decision. I think that's been a particular challenge. So having a really clear RACI of who's accountable, who's responsible, who's consulted, and making sure that everybody holds to that, I think that's really important.
Yeah, and you touched on line management. In a project-based world, it's possibly a little bit more obvious as to where the line management falls there. How do you guys deal with line management of, say, a squad? Is that done by somebody within the squad? Is there a separate hierarchy? Is that done by function, or is it someone that is just actually just a really good people person as opposed to having the technical skills to relate into the actual elements of the day-to-day job?
Okay. I've probably made my career out of people management. I think that's probably where of my strengths kind of been. But again, it's the agnostic part for me. Within the squads, we have tech leads, and like some of the tech leads when they first kind of went in that role were like, well, I'm line managing that squad. But you've got so many different capabilities that might sit within a squad that might not necessarily be the right path for that person. So for me, my own personal opinion on it is that you can have specialisms within that capability, but then they manage or they lead within that capability. So, because we've got that front end, back end split from engineering, if I use that as an example, having the kind of real growth experts or SMEs within a front end space that can support and grow that function from a capability perspective, but the people that they support might work across different functions, but they've still got that practice base there that can grow. I think that works really well because then everyone kind of feels part of it. They're not siloed in their own teams. They're not just on a one user journey or one product. They're, oh, I know someone's doing that and I can learn from that and I can do that. So the power of that community of practice approach is really big. So and that's kind of the direction that I try to do within like my direct reports as well. Like, how do you do that across your functions of your teams to make it agnostic so everyone can learn and grow together? Otherwise, you start getting real pockets of gaps of people not being like, some people are up here, some people are down there, and it can really mix it. So I think it's worked well for me so far, and probably fail at some point, but in true agile fashion, I can learn, I guess, from but yeah.
Anybody do it any differently?
Oh, don't think so.
No. So through working for a consultancy for the last 7 years, see a lot of organisations at various different stages of working within products, and they're really, really mature. But even then, the ones that are really, really mature often get a lot of friction and constraints from their financial budget process. Often working in a 12-monthly cycle and still trying to run product teams based on that. So what's your experience of working well with a finance function to properly enable a product team with an ongoing cost and hopefully benefit?
So I was going to jump in earlier and say that like most C-suite kind of think they're product people anyway. And the worst one in there is the CFO. The CFO that builds products is a terrible, terrible person. And I work with one of my best friends. He was CFO, and whenever he fed product, I shut him down straight away. So from it's always about understanding what the project is, or what the product is intended to do. Why are you doing this? If you can't explain it in 5 seconds, then it's too complex, and you break it down, and then because if everyone can understand it quickly, then everyone will understand whether that investment makes sense or not. Yeah. I've never been in the situation where we've had huge overspends. There tends to be like some time leakage, but that's accepted anyway. Who's ever delivered a project on time in here? Can I have a show of hands? Maybe. Fair enough. Great people. Yeah, well done. I haven't. But I've also kind of jimmied the timeline as well to say that I'll probably have it done by then. And you give them 2 timelines, don't you? So I think the big thing again, and I harp back to it, is communication. When you've got a problem, communicate it quickly as well, so that they understand, they can manage that budget, they can manage those resources, etc. I think that would be fairest.
Everybody else working in a 12-monthly cycle, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting topic. Trying to get a squad to commit to a date is very, very difficult, and if you're not careful, you can breed really bad culture as well, where everybody adds fat so they don't miss the date, and you don't really have a clear view of exactly what's happening. I think we've definitely fallen into that trap historically. And I think the change that we've made is to try to better communicate what commercial value and targets we're driving towards, so people can understand when we're making decisions or when we're asking for dates, the reason why, or if we're switching the squad to focus on something completely different, why are we doing that, and helping them to understand it. So we put a lot more effort in the last 12 months into that process, so that people can understand the reasons why, and feel comfortable to commit to a date, and feel comfortable to explain why a date's been missed if something's gone wrong or we found something. But I think having a collective understanding of the why, I think, is really important.
And talking about delivery, if you look at a standard sort of vanilla by design Scrum team, there's no one individual in there with delivery as part of their job title. So is delivery necessary when, as a function, as a role, when you're developing your products? Is there still a need for, you mentioned RACI before, but RACI and RAID and things like that within product build and BAU, or is that not?
But I think in the real world, yes. And but where I've seen this work really well was at George. So we had a roadmap for the year that had many projects in there. Some were more sort of strategic, but could be approached in a product methodology, like delivering increments of value. And then some were a little bit more like bottom up, and we're going to achieve these financial metrics. So I think that's where it sort of works well, because then we'd break that down into a quarterly cycle, and the delivery team, because we were so sort of spread out in terms of the different functions delivering the work, and we had dependencies outside of that core that I described earlier, it worked really well for that delivery team. So they were almost sort of driving the train. We were loading it, but they were kind of driving it and getting us through the different stops and trying to make sure that we got there on time. And to the communication point, I think delivery teams, in my experience, excel at that kind of, bottom up and top down communication and making sure that everyone's very aligned and organized to deliver. So yeah, I was sort of my best friend sort of delivery, and that was kind of the person that I was always working really, really closely with, because you don't want to be making commitments as a product team if you don't have control over everything. So you need that support, I think, for sure, in my experience anyway.
I'm guessing you're a big fan for your communication metric.
Yeah. Like I don't want to labour the point, but it's so important especially for the way that I've had to operate as well over the last 5-6 years. Essentially, the startup that I grew before my last role, we were all remote. Yeah, because everything had gone into COVID. We weren't just remote, we were growing at 150% per year. Right. It was so important to have that thing there. But one of the other bit was going back into a RACI, it became about governance as well. It's at least you're going to get it wrong some of the time. You're going really fast, etc. But make sure you just have this reference cycle back to say that I actually know who's accountable for this. I know what the impact's likely to be, so that you've at least touched in on it, understanding that you can't sit there and document everything because you're going really fast.
Yeah. So if we've got to the point of the journey where the CFO is moving away from product and it's given us the budget to run a couple of product teams, we're running on a product. The concepts of sort of trust and autonomy within the product team that the team thrive on and really, really want, right? How have you dealt with the other stakeholders in the business in order to get that sort of culturally working well, that trust and autonomy?
But you've said the most important word there, right, which is the culture. It's mainly driven from people's understanding of what they need. And I think my biggest frustration, especially kind of where we are now, is that time bound. It's got to be this date because I'm going to realise this pound money benefit instead of the wider benefit. And I talked to some of my past bits. Tesco is very militant like that. They'd work 2 years ahead. The size of them, and they would go, right, well, this quarter would be realising what the investment is or the business case, and the next one might be in a regional location, and then the next one might be a little bit of a wider net, but then in week one, that's when it's going to be everywhere. So that very strict governance around having that red tape around we need to hit these certain gates at certain points, it has its place, it's had its purpose. But then when you're in a business that's very ambitious, wants to grow very quickly, but it's growth based on revenue versus kind of where that value needs to be extrapolated, it's then quite difficult to navigate the culture, because you'll have a marketing team or a sales team or a fulfillment team or a finance team that are so driven by hitting a target and might not necessarily understand how they get there. So you really have to embed that culture quite quickly and understand and just help them understand why that value needs to be extracted by certain places. Otherwise you just end up going, you failed because you've not hit my budget at the end of this month, and I was hoping to make X amount of £1 million, and you've ruined it because I've had loads of people doing it. And if you don't get into that early and kind of break the back into it, you'll just continuously be in that cycle of disappointment with them. So
I I don't disagree with anything that's said there, but what's really important for me is that I'm thinking of a way to articulate this as well, but essentially, nobody expects it to be perfect. Yeah, and like communicating that back to senior leadership, like, yes, you might be having a brand new like ERP or whatever, but it ain't going to work on day one, right? And the expectation that it's going to all work and all your problems will be solved on day one. So it's crazy. That's another universe that we don't live in yet. Like you've got to be honest with, is it an improvement on what we did yesterday? Have I improved it? Like, when I release, is the general direction upwards and to the right? Yeah. It doesn't have to be in a straight line. But it needs to be an iteration, and that's what it's always about for me, is communicate, again, that key word, communicating that this will take time. So I can give a great example of this. So in 2020, we took our first seed money at the Modern Milkman. And I had a look at our database that had been built in India for about 15 grand. So you can imagine the state of it. It was absolutely awful. But we just taken £300,000 from like angel investors, and they were like, "Oh, what are you going to do with it?" I was like, "I'm going to take £50,000 of that, and I'm going to spend it on something that structurally you will see no difference to." Right? You will not see a better website. You will not see better customer service. You will not see anything. You have to trust me that what I'm doing is right. And what I did with that is we rewrote the entire database. We launched it, and I still have an anniversary every year because it's the 8th of June 2020 was the day me and the CTO switched it over a weekend. And I send him a text message every year on that day. But essentially what we did then, we switched it all went horribly wrong for one day. And then in the next 12 weeks, that company grew 90% in 12 weeks, right? Because what we'd done there is we reconfigured everything to allow us to market regionally and to see the impact of marketing regionally. And it just meant we would send a leaflet to LS10, and we would see the impact straight away. We go, "Oh, let's just do LS11 the week after." We were able to basically create this marketing plan that meant, bang, you could just iterate on all these results. The first day was an absolute shocker. Like, it was probably the worst. Like, that's why I remember the day, but it's like, it's never going to be perfect. And communicating that back and saying, "Look, we're going to give you a brand new website tomorrow, but it probably ain't going to convert better than the one that you've got at the minute straight away. But what it allows me to do is to make 300 changes in the next 6 months that you want to do to get all of your change requests in, so that your analytical teams are really happy. You've got all your data being pushed back into it to the point where, I mean, in these days, like, it will be making changes on the fly, essentially. But it's like, as long as you communicate that day one, probably going to be a horror show, and then, show of hands who hasn't had a horror show on day one. But using that upward trajectory and is it better than it was the day before? Even when you've had the most terrible implementation, can I at least make it better tomorrow? Yeah.
Super. And I think people have stopped putting their hands up now just to make you not feel bad about having a bad day. Thank you for that. We've touched on UX XD as a concept in a couple of the different answers. How does user experience design, whatever the function looks like in your organizations, how does that integrate into the product team, and what benefit do you see from that? And what kind of roles have you got within it as well?
First of all, I didn't say in a Scrum team there should be UX before, and there absolutely should. So just to rewind on that bit. But yeah, so my role looks after product and UX. And I think that's a really good position to be in. I think when a team's sort of in the discovery space, especially, the product team are kind of looking at what are we doing and why, what problems are we trying to solve? And I think the UX team are looking at, without actually coding, how might we solve those problems? The best UX is when it is literally a problem statement and there's no solution that's been brought by any stakeholder. It's we can do a lot of design thinking and apply lots of different tools and have lovely workshops with Post-its all over the walls, and really be creative. I think that gets harder when you're actually handed a solution. And I think within the Domino's UX team, so we have a lead that sort of reports to me, and then below that we have user experience designers, and we have a researcher. We just got a researcher. It was like Christmas Day, because now we can kind of do our own in-house research and really sort of control that ourselves. So we're hoping to grow that part of the team as well, because that massively informs all of that creativity. So big fan of UX and design in the product space for sure.
I thought it was an interesting comment before about developers liking to build things. My experience is that UXers like to research and design things. So I think that's something you have to manage carefully as well. So I think one of the things that we struggle with a little bit is who makes the decision on what we'll do research on, how long we'll spend researching, what are the different methodologies. Could we learn quicker by just making a change and measuring the response rather than doing lots of research up front? So we found by moving the UX team into squad, that decision making has become a lot more efficient, a lot more coordinated, and there's less conflict because the team are deciding as a group how they should apply those skills rather than it being a team on their own determining how to do the work. So I think that's been really beneficial for us.
Are you guys doing a lot of multivariant A/B type testing in production?
Yeah, we do that as well. Yeah.
When we talk about some of the other parts of a more traditional IT department, how have you found those relationships working with product teams? So I'm thinking about the likes of service management teams, architecture and governance processes. How have you found those interactions? Have you put them into the teams? Have you had to change the way that you work? Cultural change again? How does that work within your IT departments or tech teams, whatever you call it?
Look to the left there. I was again recently Pharmacy to you. We didn't have a solution architect team just as I joined, so that was massive to have that dedicated sort of expertise to support how we design, right, and how we decide what we need to do for the future. So embedding that function has been another part of the journey, and hence why I said it was quite embryotic at the start of this talk. And then bringing in the skill sets that are gaps, because you had people that were the solution architects, but to be honest, they were right. They might have been just putting some boxes on a page and trying to understand how we get the legacy systems to talk to each other. So that's been a huge transformation. So embedding them into the wider team has been really important at the right time, not at the last minute to go, yeah, we need this out next week. How does it work with this system that's about 50 years old and written in this code? So bringing them in at the right time is super important. But same with data. You've mentioned about database, right? That the foundational level of getting the foundation right means that everything else becomes a little bit easier. Because if it's not right, that's where you fail, and you fail quickly. So we haven't done a great job of that yet in Pharmacy to you, but the plan is there to mature and grow into that space, which is really important. Which then supports that run model. So you talk about like the service management stuff. So having a real clear plan, build and run approach, albeit you've got to have a foundation, you've got to start somewhere. That's a journey that we're going on at the moment, and I'm excited to see where it leads us, because again, we're quite ambitious, there's lots to go. But if you don't bring them in at the right point in this very last minute, or you're handing over rubbish, or you've got, we go live on this tomorrow, by the way, this is what it looks like. You're going to fail, and you can't support your customers, and they're the ones that tend to moan first, don't they? So you have to bring them in at the right point, and you have to make sure they're set up for success from the start.
I'm assuming that you've got sort of first, second line, sort of traditionally as you would do a service desk, and then third line, sort of you break it, you fix it, goes into the product teams, does it? Or
well, the product function is brand new at the moment, so it's kind of that process is being launched. But there's boards and pits of tech debt, if I want to put it in the most unprofessional manner, but it will filter its way through into a backlog that obviously the introduction of a new product function for us will help refine that into what where it should sit. Truth be told, what's happened is that we've had a complaint, someone's written a ticket, and it's just sat somewhere for forever and a day. It breaks, and then someone goes, "Yeah, I raised a ticket on that 2 years ago, and it's not been fixed." But that is something that's probably what drives me forward, is that it's a blank canvas for us to get better, and the only way is up. So you do have that traditional first line, and they are kind of specialised in. Some might look at apps, some might look at database structure, but it's growing for us.
else, particularly around service management, everything goes wrong?
Yeah, I can comment. So we made a shift probably 4 or 5 years ago where we moved away from a more traditional model of having a development team, a support team, and we moved into a DevOps methodology. And it was definitely a cultural shift and a cultural challenge. Stuart's at the back of the room led that change. So our developers are responsible for what they build. They're on call and they're supported by their product colleagues for deployment related issues. What we found is if you're getting called in the middle of the night, you're more likely to make sure that it doesn't break because you don't want to get called in the middle of the night. We've matured our performance and monitoring capabilities more in the last 5 years than we did in the 10 before. And we have a really deep understanding of exactly how the system's performing. And we've made a huge amount of progress. I think the tech debt point's interesting. We changed our approach to that probably about a year ago. So historically, technology was responsible for tech debt, and invariably it didn't really get the focus that it needed. So for this year, we created some common objectives across tech and product and UX. We created KPIs that the squads have to meet, and tech debt is one of those key pillars. So the squad is responsible for making sure that we don't have a building of tech debt. So putting that prioritization in the melting pot with everything else. So we're making strides. We've still got a way to go, but yeah, progress.
So it all goes into the melting pot with your product analysts who groom and maintain and prioritize the backlog.
Yeah.
It's on the PA then to make sure the tech debt gets to the
Yeah. And we have a kind of a governance process that sits across it. So they have to report on all of their KPIs, one of which is technical debt. So we get clear oversight and understanding if it's not being prioritized and if it's beginning to build, so that we can pull the levers where necessary.
So Luke, with product now moving outside of technology in pharmacy to you, how do you see that working? Because I'm assuming the product will still have control of the backlog. How are you assuming the tech debt stuff is going to get tackled?
It just depends on, I'm not going to whack out the agile methodology Bible here or anything like that, but it depends on how you run your delivery model, right? So for us, we don't have scrum roles, right? Which is madness when you think about a business of that size and the technology it touches. So the introduction of that is going to support that, of how that gets refined and how that's managed. But taking product out of tech to be strategic and focus on the what and the why with the business owners that are driving that forward, and kind of shaping that process as we're like right now, right? We literally had an SLT day yesterday where we launched it to the rest of the SLT to say, like, this is where you can, who and how you can work with to get your ideas from this point to that point. It's going to be interesting to see how it goes. But for me, it's about them being taken out of the detail of day to day today, because we had a real split of people that were like product engineers, that's what some of them like to call themselves, or they're kind of what I like to call in their ivory tower. You know, I'm too important to be knowing about that type of stuff. So I think allowing them the time to understand the business needs over the technology needs is going to help my technology team focus on what is the right way to introduce the right quality through that. So they're still going to very much be in charge of refining that backlog. And we spoke about tech debt before, and again, the whole 2-year comment, like I wasn't making a joke about it, like that seriously happens quite a lot in pharmacy too, is because the way that we've split the workload just hasn't been prioritised in the right way, and that is very much driven by a time-bound revenue sort of date that we need to hit. So the percentage split of what you might load into a sprint, for example, is something that just doesn't really exist for us at the moment, and I think that's going to be a huge benefit of us having product in that space to really allocate and go, right, well, this is coming up as a clear pain point of our customers that needs to be in this X% that you've set within that 2-3 week window, that is then going to help us tenfold this opportunity versus this new introduction of a feature that we don't know how it might react yet. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that transforms and helps us as we move forward.
When we talked about product teams being formed, delivering a new product and then going into BAU or having things passed into BAU. But for BAU product teams, how have you found the team members from a boredom perspective? Because if you're working predominantly in a project-based approach, you get to go around and do different things and slightly different context and use cases. Have you found product teams working on the same product for a long period of time start to get a little bit bored by it and want to do other things? How have you had that work?
that one in the context of, so like I said before, we're set up in channels, and our app team, we're quite a small product team. So we have a senior product manager and then 2 product owners that work in that space, and the development is done external. So for a big project, there's work that's fed from a lead product person. They'll feed in the requirements to the senior product person in app, and they'll just work on that stuff. So it's all very prescriptive, like just requirement driven. And then the rest of the stuff is kind of, we have a Crow work stream. So we're doing constant experimentation and successful tests go live. And then we have a core backlog. And sort of coming into the role and sort of having a look around that backlog, it's very, it's just bits and pieces of things everywhere and not a massive amount of value attached to those things. So we've had, it's been very exciting. We've had Apptober. You can tell I'm not a marketeer, but we've very much kind of gone into that space and looked at, you know, what themes can we create out of the existing backlog? And then what value can we attribute to those themes, and how can we start to talk about an app sort of bottom-up product-led driven roadmap? And again, like I was saying before about demonstrating something in a really small, slightly less risky place, this is the place to do it for us, because all of our development is external. It's a really well-established team and methodology. And so we're looking at our Q4 sort of roadmap for now, but we're hoping to sort of blend that into like a longer term roadmap, and looking at themes and attaching commercial value to those themes, and then going to the point before. So we're not seen as a cost to the business, we're actually seen as a revenue driver. It's just that's not the sort of culture or the way that we're seen at the moment. So it's more trying to demonstrate that, and like I say, starting small. So watch this space, the app's just going to blow up and be amazing.
Last question then before we finish for a break. Although CPO has been around for a while, there's not a lot of CPOs out there. There's started to be a few CPIOs within the market as well, so Chief Product and Information Officer. Based on your experience, is combining a role into a CPIO a good thing? Is it too much? Are there potential conflicts of interest there? And in your organisations, ultimately at board level, who owns product?
I've had zero exposure to any of those roles, to be perfectly honest, in the environment.
Just that's the last bit then. Who owns product within your organisation?
Weirdly, I did when I joined PharmCTU, and I've been really honest. Like, I've never really been ingrained in the world of product and understanding how that should work. So we haven't come onto it yet, but ChatGPT has been my best friend for a few months now. So I've not been exposed in the way that I have at PharmCTU to learn and understand like the true purpose of it. So I had product in there, which is why it didn't work, because I was like, well, it shouldn't sit with me, right? I'm here to make sure we develop and deliver the best we can for the patients that we serve. But we acquired a business that had an amazing, robust process around managing products, and we've been great to now have someone from that business come in as our product director. So it's not kind of board level or ELT, but from an SLT perspective. So again, I keep saying it, right, but I'm excited to see where that leads us as a business, because having that experience in there that can talk about the journeys and the bits that they've been on in different businesses is going to help. So those specific roles I've not been exposed to, but I think there's definitely a purpose of having a core owner or a core leader in that space that can define and drive it forward. And we talk about it a lot, but just having the ability to fail and learn from it, really.
So that product director reports into a technical person, a
Well,
commercial person?
We've introduced a chief strategy officer,
Okay.
which so a strategic office, if you want to put it that way. But that's not just product, but obviously there's the strategy stuff we talked about, 12 monthly plan and things like that. We've got that in there, and also the mergers and acquisitions and partnership space. So really working on that part of our business to to fan out. So that was part of the introduction yesterday that we had with our SLT team. So that's where it will sit and hopefully support that strategic vision of our business and the growth that we want to do.
I think it depends on the industry and the size of the business. Is my view. So we're in a heavily regulated industry. We are responsible for hundreds of billions of pounds of people's assets. my role as being responsible for tech is delivery of change, but running the machine and making sure that it's safe, it's secure, and that it operates. We split product out, and we've actually combined it with customer services and operations. So our product teams are working with our colleagues who are dealing with our customers to try and build a product that is seamless, whether it's digital or human. And we've tried to combine it in that way. So I think in our business, having it split and having somebody responsible for defining what the product looks like, how it's going to serve our customers, and how that mirrors our offline journey is really important to have that segregated. And then I return the responsibility for kind of executing the technology that underpins it. But in a smaller business or in an industry that isn't so heavily regulated, I could definitely see that there would be benefits of combining the two. I think it has to suit how the business operates.
That business unit with the customer, is that a chief customer officer then? Or
yeah, chief product and service officer. Yeah. And he's actually set the team up, and we're trying to align our customer services and ops people to those product journeys and those squads that we talked about. So, as an example, so we have a team of people that's responsible for our self-managed pension. And that team, we have a squad that's responsible for that as a product and the journeys. We've then got customer services people who are responsible for talking to those customers. We've got back office people that are responsible for dealing with requests for those customers. And they're all working together for that kind of single purpose. And we're trying to align ourselves that way.
Just in the lines between data, tech, product all get blurred all of the time. I think that the role of a CPIO, I would, or even just a CIO in general, would be, it's kind of bound by like what makes your beer taste better. So essentially, what does the business do? Because if the business is like Chris's and the technology is what drives the revenue, that's too big a role. But if it's like something like mine, where a lot of it is just bolting together third-party tools, you can absolutely have a CPIO. I actually refused the CTO title when I was going in. I wanted it to be CDO because I was like, we don't need a lot of tech. I don't want to be positioning us as a tech player. We will need a lot of data. We need to look after all of that. But essentially, we're not really built, apart from like a couple of like APIs, etc. We're not really building anything here. So, I was like, we don't need that thing. So it's, I think, where you don't need a CTO and where the technology is not the product, I think you can absolutely have one.
Thank you very much. Right, we've got to the break, so there will be refreshments outside. Sam, yeah, super. We're going to turn off the recording for the next half hour. If you could be back in, please, for 3 o'clock. If you do need to go outside, just remember you're going to need one of the 4 IT folk or the II guys to let you back in again. Okay, but I'll see you back at 3 o'clock. Thank you. Paul. So hopefully everybody has got a list of questions, or at least one, just in case I pick on somebody to ask our lovely panel. Please excuse the pointing. I don't know people's names, so I'm just going to have to point at people. I've got plans in the audience with one question. He's promised me if I really need to go there, if we go there, we know it's not going well. So yeah, open floor really. Has anybody got a question for the panel?
So I think one thing that's apparent from listening to you all over the last hour is that there is no one way of doing this, and that actually it does vary from business to business. But one of the things I think though is that is a product operating model a tech thing, or is it a business thing? Because I think that typically where I have worked in other businesses and friends that work in similar fields, the one problem that always seems to follow this model is that the business is still driven by finance, budget, dates, hitting clients' targets, meeting, private equity investment cycles and all that kind of stuff. Did businesses want this, or is this just how we within the tech environment think that, is the most optimal way of working, and how do you kind of bring the business side of things along?
I can talk to that. I think so the role I'm doing at the moment sits in digital marketing and outside of tech, and that's the first time that I've worked outside of tech. So I'm in these meetings and things are going on that I have no clue about. They're talking about advertising and it's not familiar. And I think what I see there compared to what I've had before. So before I've had roadmaps that span, we were talking about journeys before. So from like in a commercial sense, for a customer, however they land at the site, whether it's through like campaign marketing or whatever, they get to the site, right through to the end, like they may need contact center assistance. So that full end-to-end journey. The product team sitting in digital marketing means that we can't cover all of that. So I think when you think of it in terms of a business function, I don't think that that's an ideal place for product management to sit. And then I think on the flip side, when you look at it within IT, it makes more sense because IT usually services a full wide organisation. But I quite like what you're doing at your place, because I think it's sort of pulling it out of all of that and kind of trying to make it agnostic. Obviously, it depends on the industry and what you're trying to achieve, but I think there's biases either way. It definitely depends on the organisation.
We spoke outside, didn't we? And there is no one way to spin any of this. And I said outside as well when I first done my agile training. The woman, I remember it so vividly. The person that said to she was like, "You need to remember, like, we live in the real world. We don't live in the agile world." And I think you see that a lot in businesses where they're like agile. This is what we need to do. And I didn't work in tech until 2021. Like, I generally didn't know what a REST API was at that point. Just didn't. It wasn't my bag. And I think that's why I've had that adoption of product not being in a tech space. It serves its purpose. You need to have that bit of knowledge in both. But you then get, I feel you get conflicts, because then you've got like true techies that are obviously responsible for a product or a journey or a persona that sits in a business, that will want to do the selfish bit around the product that they own, whereas then they'll clash with a marketeer or someone else that goes, well, I know that feature is going to give me, speak up. I shall, okay. Maybe I'm not sitting too close to the mic. But then they'll clash, because you've got a marketeer that will say, well, I know I'm going to get that much money by that date. So I think understanding where you can find the happy medium is what we're going to trial. And I see, it might not work, it could fail, but the main thing is that we've tried it to see if it does work out of that tech space. Because I think you're right, predominantly people associate it with a tech-led environment, but it'll be really interesting to see how it works for us, especially the mission being patient first. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes. But yeah, definitely doesn't have a one size fits all.
Ricky?
Yeah.
That's what happened.
It's kind of a bit of a follow on from your question, actually. So it's probably quite helpful to do this, because I guess we hear a lot about the product teams and how they work in the building and all that great stuff. But actually, keep talking about communication, and I think communication is crucial in any change anyway. But actually, much broader than that, it's the whole change management and bringing the business. How do you build that full change management capability into kind of the whole product cycle? Where, at what points throughout that cycle, a change management capability involved, and how is that then delivered, I guess, and educated throughout the business, which is more than just communication, I guess, is what I'm saying.
I can remind you on that. So across kind of product, UX, and IT, we're probably 230 people across all those teams today. And within that, we've got a project management community of about 20 people. So we very much still use project rigor and governance where we need to, but we execute the change through our squads. So the way that we tend to approach it is, and it was touched on before, if you've got a change that touches, it could be third parties, it could be operational changes, it could be compliance changes. If it touches numerous things, what we find is to burden the squad with that ultimately just slows it down. So what we try and do is we have the project wrapper to deliver all of those different pieces and to change the business, where we let the squad actually get on with delivering the change. So the relationship between the product manager and the project manager is really important. And what we found as well is that the line between those two roles can move depending on what you're delivering, the experience of the people. So we've seen it work very well if we put a very experienced product manager with a more junior project manager, and actually they can provide more support into that broader change process. But similarly, if you've got a more junior product manager, a more experienced project manager can really help as well. And having that project wrapper, the way that we have our squad set up is if we're having to deliver as change to our pricing as an example, that's going to touch 6 different squads. How do you coordinate all of that work and all of the other business change that's needed? So I think that's why we certainly feel that there's a long-term role for project management and more rigor. It's more how you mesh the two methodologies together for me.
Yeah, you mentioned KPIs. I thought it's interesting talking about that. Well, I'm just interested to get all of yous on what you're measuring. How are you measuring the success of the models, the different models you've implemented? What's working? What hasn't worked? How do you know it's successful? What your measures are?
Within which team, like a technical team or a product team?
Within the product, yeah, within
the product team, it would be like, for us, it would be like number of epics dealt with, number of change requests received, number of those actioned. It never quite gets down into the impact of those changes, etc. They're kind of taken for granted that they wouldn't have got on that board otherwise. On the dev side, in delivery, it's like how many bugs, time to fix, time to resolution, etc. I think those things are fairly well scoped. I'd ask a question back, to be honest, which is, what would you like to see in those as KPIs for a product team? Ask that to anyone in the room, really.
Mine's a bit more holistically, I think. KPIs are quite operationally driven, aren't they? And I think, you've got teams in the business that will drive that based on what they're trying to serve and what value they're trying to do. But my biggest pain point is route to live. I'm not going to talk about go to market or that type of stuff, but talk about the whole operation of development and delivery of engineering products. The quality of what we produce from a coding point of view, the way we can manage a cycle through to release, and those type of things, not slipping out of the opportunities that we're trying to do. So I've tried to break it down into like, where are the pain points within that cycle? Like, is our quality assurance department doing the best thing? Are we automated enough? Is it too manual? Like those type of things. So a measure of success for me at the moment across the transformation that we're going through is, are we operationally efficient in our route to live process? And that's got so many different factors to it, but holistically, like, that is a focus for me, because I think if you can nail that, and I think back to the change question that you answered, right? Selfishly, I think if you don't have a strong change function as a foundation, you're not really going to be successful. And that can be spun in many ways, right? Because change can be project or it can be product, but the concept of change can be applied anywhere, right? I can change the clothes I want to wear, or something like that. But having a strong change foundation will support that whole process. So for me, it's the holistic view of what's going to make me more efficient and successful.
People metrics are really important as well, right? You need to be looking at your employee engagement survey results, however you do that, but also down to absence rates and churn. You might be hitting some of these KPIs, you might be green across the dashboard, but your people are showing you what they're really feeling on the ground through those different metrics. So they're really important as well.
So something we're aspiring to, and we're by no means achieving it, but we're definitely making progress, is trying to tie together or show the link between the top level business objective and the work that the squad are doing. So if we take, for example, so one of our core objectives is to hit 7-8% organic growth year on year. So we've taken that as our firm-wide objective. What we try to do is break that down as we go through the different layers of the organisation down to an individual. So as an example, our acquisition squad has got a KPI around how many new accounts we open and how the changes that they make on our acquisition journeys influence that number. Our activation squad have got targets around how quickly accounts are funded within the first 30 days and how they can influence that cycle. How many lapsed customers we have. So we're trying to get the squads to come up with KPIs that we can actually point right back up to the kind of North Star of the firm, and trying to ensure that each person understands what their role is or what they're contributing to that overall KPI, We try and do that across all roles, not just within our product and development space, but I think trying to get people to understand what is it that I'm actually contributing. I think that's one of our kind of fundamentals that we're trying to get across with mixed success, I would say, but that's what we're striving for anyway.
I'd add to that as well, and sort of that is similar to like what we're trying to go after. And I think somebody mentioned it before, but it's almost like at the start of something, you're very clear about what and why you're doing something, and what it is that you're going to measure to know whether you've realised that success. And like probably during my whole career, I've seen, you know, we're doing this project for this reason, or we're doing this product development for this reason, and we're always so quick to go to the next thing that we never look back and reflect on what we've already done, and what did that do what we said it was going to do. Do we need to iterate on it to get more benefit from it? So what we're trying to do, and I've seen it work quite well, again at George, is we do like quarterly reviews, and we look forward to what we're about to deliver, but we look backwards as well on the success of what we've already delivered. And the product manager is ideally probably usually partnered with a stakeholder, because a lot of the stuff that we do is project or a variant of a project, and so it's not necessarily originated in the product team, but I try to get the product team to sort of partner with stakeholders that are kind of where the origin point of that project is, and together they're kind of measuring back on, actually we said it was going to do this and we've missed the target, or actually we've exceeded it and we want to iterate in this way. So I do think that like looking at what you've actually achieved is really important.
As you mentioned earlier on, changing the perception of being a cost centre into a profit centre, right? You need to realise those benefits, celebrate the success.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you could be and you never know it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Super. Question from Teams, from Kerry. We're looking to implement an agile approach to simple change. Where should we start and what are the watch outs?
I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to that question, to be honest. I think just trying something is the main thing. So we spoke to me outside that nothing is going to work perfectly first time, and not being afraid to try something different is the most important thing. So I think establish a good foundation of what you're trying to achieve, like what that business purpose is. Like you can't just go with the textbook answer of this is what agile is. Try and pick what's right for your business, because it won't work in every vertical or every industry that you go to. So really understand what is going to be right for the team that you work in. And I think you mentioned the people side of it. Don't underestimate the power of empowerment, because I think most of your teams might have the best ideas that you've got that lead into those other functions. And I think if you empower your people on a journey that you're trying to transform into, more often than not, they're going to deliver that journey for you. So I've always taught as well that, you know, if you look after the people, they look after the customers, that look after the pounds, that then look after you. So I think, you know, there isn't a right or wrong answer, but just establish what that foundation is. And I think don't be afraid to fail at it. That's a good starting point.
I think if you need a proper steer on where to do, pick something that you can afford to go spectacularly wrong and it won't hurt your company, would be my actual advice. Yeah. You know, because as long as it doesn't go as bad, set your bar really low and make sure you clear the bar would be my thing. So, you know, pick something that isn't like business critical, you know, and try and adapt it through that way is probably the safest way. Yep. You know, and then it will give you the confidence for your next approach to go, what can I make better tomorrow, sort of thing.
Yeah. My suggestion would be don't go big bang either, and don't go too big too quickly. Doing it within an exemplar squad generally seems to have worked well in the past, where you've got a group of people and not just all the keen people. Have some people who are really, really positive, have some of the detractors in there as well, so people can see them change, get some excitement going about it, and absolutely do it somewhere where you can afford to fail, and do it slowly that way. But it's going to depend on the context and the scale and everything else.
Can I add one thing? I would say as well, don't just throw away some of the more traditional frameworks and processes either. So we work in a highly regulated industry, and there are high expectations in terms of audit and control. Our software development teams do not like our change management process. So we took the approach to say, okay, well, let's look at what is that process trying to achieve and why, and how can you achieve that within your methodology. and I think that's been quite successful, and actually it sort of changed the thinking away from I'm being forced to go down this clunky bureaucratic process to being what is it I'm actually trying to achieve, and can I do that in a different agile way? So I think that's important as well. As, you know, there's nothing necessarily wrong with those frameworks. It's just how do you achieve the outcome in a different way.
You can have the elements of what would be discussed within a change advisory board baked into your process anyway in the right way, without having to come to a room and present your case. Right?
So we deploy, you know, 10, 15, 20, 30 changes every day, but we have a certain level of change that goes through our squads that has to go to the advisory board because it's particularly high risk, it touches a particularly high risk journey, where everything else goes through its own individual process. So it's just trying to strike that balance.
And your engineers are on call as well, right?
Absolutely.
That's a difference. Yeah, at the back.
Hi, so we've got a situation where we're being acquired by a larger organisation. We run things in a traditional waterfall-y way to projects. The organisation that's acquiring us runs under product teams. And we need to work out which strategy is the best regarding, do we start to evolve the way they deliver and mix into their teams, for want of a better term, or do we start to establish our own kind of mirror image teams, what they've got? Have you got any wise words, if you like, on what a strategy is? Because we're just at the very start of that journey. We need to work out what the best strategy is for taking people with us on it, basically.
What industry do you work in? It's highly regulated.
Highly regulated, yeah.
It's an interesting one, really, because there's a purpose for both. I think you just need to work out with them, just understand from each other what works well for them, what works for you, and then what doesn't work well, and vice versa, and understand the blend. Because again, we spoke, you can't go big bang, you can't just go one or the other. You're going to have to understand kind of where you blend those things together. You know, I think that's going to be the best approach. Otherwise, you're going to have conflict. And I think, Chris, you mentioned it right around bringing some of those people that aren't necessarily early adopters into the mix early to get them to be on that journey. And I think, again, I'll say it again, just don't worry about if it goes wrong. Just try it. I say it to my guys all the time. I'd rather you come to me saying you've tried something and it's not worked, rather than ask me for permission, because you know I haven't got all the answers, and you need to use your team for that. So I would just try and do that.
So we've just going through a similar process. So the other way around. So we have a smaller development team that we have joined our business. They work in a much more agile way, much smaller squads, product and tech much closer together, much more R&D type methodologies. Whereas we're on a bigger scale, we have more control and more rigor. We try to do exactly as you've just described. So I think my lesson learned is don't do it for too long, because we've been trying for nearly 2 years now, and we've just decided we're going to rip the band-aid off because softly hasn't worked, and we're just going to have to take a more firm and direct stance. So I think that would be my learning is I think we probably waited too long before we just ripped the band-aid off.
Which way have you landed? Being more like you, obviously.
They're joining our way.
Yeah.
Next question, please.
We've got lots of focus on AI at the moment. So are you setting up AI teams and they are like skilled people that you've hired, or are you spreading AI knowledge in the teams that you've got, or are you head in the sand?
I'm quitting my job and going AI first, going all in essentially. The way I see it is from my perspective, a lot of people are trying to fit AI into their business. How can it help? How can it, how can it improve? How can it do this? I'm looking at it and going, every single process that exists in a business is a legacy decision. Would you now, so I'm reevaluating it and going, would that process exist if AI was there at the time to make it? And I want to go and build a new business to do that.
Which is a luxury if you could do that. But if you're in a business today that needs to continue to operate today, got product teams today, journey aligned or tech aligned, what journey do we take them on?
Answer. Yeah. So from my perspective is like, can you afford to change the process as well as well as the tooling? If you can afford to change the process and reevaluate the process, then absolutely you can take everyone on that journey. What if you've got to maintain that process in order to keep your P&L, etc., you're gonna have clunkier solutions. You can absolutely bring in stuff, but you won't maximize what you're getting. You know, you'll be able to boilerplate things quicker, prototype quicker, you know, maybe even get your feedback loops and your data sorted quicker. But unless you're fundamentally being able to reassess that, I don't think you'll ever fully get what you need out of it.
Got by way of example, help desk teams, and they need to know things to help people.
Yeah.
We could quite quickly train agentic agents to be a co-pilot. Then ultimately we could present that through a digital front end. I guess the question I'm trying to ask though is, as you go on that journey of creating capabilities that are AI powered, do you see the best approach to be to put the skills like a BA, like a Scrum Master, like a UX, like an AI expert into the teams? Separate teams are experimenting with AI that runs in parallel to the standard teams where it's going, because the technology and the capabilities are moving so fast right now, and it could be a distraction to the pace that the product teams are working at.
So I'll give you my view on that. So I'm going to steal an analogy from my boss, which I really like. So he talks about if you've got a bird, if you hold the bird too tight, you kill it. If you don't hold it tight enough, it'll fly away. I think the mistake that we've made is we've held too tight. So the risks around AI and what we could incur as a result of that, I think we probably constrained ourselves a bit too much. And we did that by setting up a team who were responsible for AI and looking at the early use cases and potentially how we're going to deploy that within the organization. And I think the mistake we made is by doing that, we've missed out on leveraging some of the skills and some of the talent that we have in other teams of where AI could be more broadly deployed. So we're trying to kind of loosen our grip a little bit and look for use cases that exist in teams that can be autonomous and can be delivered themselves, still having a governance around it, but just not as tight. So I think having looked at how we've progressed over the last 12, 18 months, I think we've probably been too controlled. And I think releasing it to enable people to deploy those kind of tools, but in a more measured way, is probably the way I would have done it in hindsight.
And I like looked at specific to yours. I think that I think you'll have to get the squad to invest themselves essentially. So you want to be leveling up the people within the squad to deliver it themselves rather than having a load of specialists, because honestly, I don't think the specialists are going to be that interested in working in a business, is the honest answer. I think they're on about creating their own revolution. I work quite closely with a product team at Retool, which is all San Francisco based. They have all ran off for the hills to set up their own businesses, and the businesses that are coming back with are bizarre. They're all like business processing outsourcing, or they're working on insurance claims, and I'm like, why is this? It's because they've got teams of 5 that can tackle a $70 billion industry, for instance. So I think that if you want to build that capability, you've got to put it on the people within the team to level up themselves and give them the freedom to breathe and say, how can you use Claude Code? How can you use Codex? Have you did anyone use Codex in their in any of their previous changes, and go at it that way? Because I think having a team of specialists is dangerous, because they probably go and find a bit of your business and go, let's go off and do it, essentially.
I'm to agree, but there's pressure to get specialists in to move quickly rather than allowing the teams to grow and pick this up. So it's interesting to hear how other people are tackling that pressure.
I think we faced that exact question where I'm working, and we set up an AI team to kind of do R&D type work and experiment with how it, which areas of the business it could help automate. But we have very quickly realized that actually we need to embed them within the teams to enable to get some of this, as you've said, in terms of embedding. So we're treating them as more of an enabling team function, so that they're like architecture. They don't necessarily sit in the delivery team kind of 100% of their day, but they're there as the representation of, are we thinking about AI? What are the guidelines for our company in terms of you know, how we want AI to work, and within that framework, so that's what we're doing.
I've got both sides of the coin a little bit here. So, you know, your engineers might not be telling you, but I guarantee you they're using AI tools in everything that they do. So, you know, that again, that's that empowerment piece. Like they've got all great ideas and there'll be tools that they use to help them do their job more efficiently. But again, we're in a high regulated part of our business is high regulated as well. So you've got patient data, you talk about the NHS and things like that. So we also do need to have some specialists to help us introduce what the best practices could be. But we've then got a really hungry engineer base that are also then feeding into that idea. So our focus is on the ethical side of it, around how do we introduce, without taking like 5 years to go, what is the right policy and process around AI, but kind of, you know, to your point, how do we take advantage of the people that are hungry already within our business that then feed into our data model as such. So the AI is in my data team now. So we've kind of got a data and AI team to help with that foundation, but they work very closely with that population because they really want to just abuse every tool they can to make their job super easy. But we have to be really cautious around the data that might be crunched as part of that. So that partnership works really well. But again, it's still quite embryotic, still quite fresh, but the use cases that we then might be able to drive from it that serve patients a lot better and take stress away from, you know, what they do within the NHS. Is the limit. So yeah, there's so many different options.
I think that kind of neatly weaves into a question that we've got on Teams from Paul, who says it was touched on earlier, being flexible about size and skill sets in product teams. Have you had resources assigned across more than one product team at the same time due to resource constraints? If not, how have you avoided sharing resource across the teams? So I guess this is the use case where you don't want any particular role sat there not, you know, at full capacity all the time, as opposed to, oh, hold on, we're blocked on that, we can't deal with that because Emma doesn't come back till Thursday. How have you dealt with that in your teams?
I'm actually in that position right now where the teams are spread across multiple pieces. So I use the universe concept, right? That's our storefront team, but essentially our e-com team. But they've got multiple products, multiple user journeys, multiple personas that come in there. And I think that's why I said earlier on in the first part that having people that can be agnostic and understand those user journeys is really important, because we can't have that in a business that wants to try and move really quickly and move really agile where you're so dependent on single points of failure. And I think that happens quite a lot of businesses, because you will, again, in the AI piece, right, you'll get people that will hone in on a certain skill set and almost make themselves, you know, untenable to the point where, you know, you keep that skill set locked in. So I think it's really important to keep that agnostic approach to avoid that from a resource point of view. The flip side of that is it makes it so difficult to then try and do so many different bits of delivery, because, you know, you also don't want people to be siloed, but you don't want people tripping over each other, and it's quite hard to manage. So, you know, it's something that we're going through at the moment and seeing how it goes. But yeah.
And being a consultancy, lots of really experienced consultants out there working often across different product teams within the same client. One of the big constraints that maybe isn't so obvious is not necessarily their availability to the team, especially if everyone's working remotely. They can be available on Slack or Teams, and you know they're very good at switching context quite rapidly. But it was more the time drain of the meetings or the ceremonies, the clashes thereof, really reducing their working hours that they could be productive within a day. A lot of my one-to-ones was about tackling that problem, as opposed to the context switching or their availability.
I think definitely an issue that we've experienced is the impact that context switching has. And whether that be context switching because we've deliberately changed priorities, or whether that's context switching because we're having to move people between teams to cover gaps. So I think a lesson that we've learned is sometimes it's better to live with the gap and accept a delay than necessarily try and switch somebody to fill the gap. We've got examples where we've had to cope with gaps because you've got people off. But we've also sometimes taken a conscious decision to pool resource where we know we might have a number of squads that don't potentially have enough specific work for that discipline. So we've had examples where it works in both, but I think don't underestimate the impact of context switching, because it can be a real drain.
Within within product and product specific roles, so our product analysts, our product owners, our product managers, you've generally got some redundancy within your squad, especially from a developer, possibly a QA perspective. How much of a single point of failure within the squads or the grouping of squads are the product roles within your orgs? Is it like, oh, that person's going to be off for 2 weeks, then we're done for, or?
I think I can speak to that as a, so when I first started at Asda on grocery home shopping and was doing it all, and I considered myself the luckiest there because all my team were co-located and it had all the ingredients that we talked about before as a scrum team. And I think it depends partly on the maturity, because at the start, when we were sort of forming, if I went away from that team for a day or a week, there would be a huge gap because I wasn't feeding the work in. But after, say, I don't know, 6 months or so, that team became so established and the backlog became so established. It was almost a bit textbook in the sense that I could, write some sort of user story and not go so far with acceptance criteria, and the team kind of knew what to do. And over time, I also sort of fed in the why. So not just stories and acceptance criteria, but why are we doing this? Where does it fit? And we talked before about it. You can see in the sort of corporate strategy where your work fits. And I think if you can, as a product function, spread that amongst your peers, that means then that when you do get gaps, there's not like bottlenecks that are created. It was a bit idealistic, what I've just said, but it does work.
Question, please.
So just to add on to that, so ignoring the people bit, not the people, but thinking about dependencies from a product perspective. So where there's a new transformation initiative that covers different product lines, how do you manage that prioritization across those different teams and eventually conflicts across those product lines?
It's difficult, I would say. It's definitely difficult. So we had an example of that. We had an example of that last week, actually, where we've got a whole set of changes that we're going to be putting live that have regulatory lead times for communication to clients. So we've got fixed dates around them. It's a really important change, but equally we're trying to deploy a whole new product, and the same squad had to deliver work for both projects. And for us as an executive team, we thought the priority was quite clear. Risk emerged that actually they'd been working on things the wrong way around, and nobody could seem to answer why nobody understood what the priority was. So I think it can be difficult. For me, that's where I think project rigor is important, and understanding the priority of different projects. And I think we've got to the root of why that happened. I think understanding the priority of projects and making sure that everybody understands what that sequencing is, it's difficult, but I think having the project wrapper around it can help, but by no means does it prevent it.
Or somebody suggests that you do safe and then you spend a year doing a reorg before the actual transformation that you want to do. Probably that.
I think that it's a really good point that you're asking, actually, but around like the whole topic of the conversation is product versus project, but actually I'm not sure that it is versus, because I think like there's a whole like profession of project managers, delivery, and I'm a delivery person, who are really proficient in managing dependencies and managing risk and all that kind of stuff. And I think that sometimes in a product model, people can kind of just think, oh, well, we don't need that anymore. And then I think people become a bit stuck when they realise that there are all these other problems that you face then, that who's going to do that? Because is that product person's responsibility? Is it a Scrum Master responsibility? And actually it kind of sits somewhere in a grey area that no one's really managing.
If you are safe inspired, your release train engineer can step in cross coordination.
Companies that do safe.
You can take inspiration from it in the quarterly planning and some of the what I intend to do this quarter and did I achieve it this quarter. That's much different than a retrospective. I think if you go whole hog and you adopt it completely, then
I think we could do a whole separate session, Sam, make some notes, on delivery within the agile space. But I think for the release train engineers and the organisations that I've seen have done it, that generally come from Scrum Master roles in the org previously. And I think there's a track there, and then there's a whole track for people that come from a PM background who give you the delivery skills, but also all the rigor that comes with it as well, applied in a really nuanced but pragmatic way into an agile workflow. That's two different routes there that could be a whole different conversation. Yes, please.
Thanks. Just unpick this a bit more, please. From our left. Talk about putting a project wrapper around these things. And in my experience, that's where it goes catastrophically wrong. You know, when you're trying to deliver a fixed piece of scope to a fixed time scale with an agile squad that delivers in sprints. And in my experience, you end up in situations where the project sponsor says things like, well, when am I going to get this? And the squad turned around and said, well, I can't tell you, it's agile. How do you square that circle?
So I'm personally, so I'm a big advocate of agile. I'm a big advocate of dates. I think culturally having a target, a date to work to, focuses the team. It drives at a target, and having that, I personally feel is very important. I know a lot of people won't agree with that, but that's my personal view. The culture that we try and instill, which isn't always successful, is that it's okay to miss a day. It's okay as long as we have a sensible explanation as to why that's happened. It's okay. It's okay to miss a day, but you have to have something to aim at, and we have to have, you know, for commercial reasons, we're a publicly listed part of a publicly listed group. We have targets that we have to hit, and helping people understand that is important. I don't necessarily think we have a project wrapper to hit a day. I think we have a project wrapper to ensure that we deliver on that broader business change, and that, you know, if we're dealing with third parties, we've got appropriate control around contracts. If we're dealing with a regulator, we've got appropriate control around that. So tracking all of the deliverables outside of what the kind of core product squad is. But I genuinely believe, though, it comes down to having a clear set of responsibilities and a good working relationship between the project manager and the product manager, and a joint accountability for delivering on that thing, and trying to build that culture where, you know, it's like we're collectively responsible for the delivery of this thing, not just one person. Don't get me wrong, we've had examples where it's gone really, really well. We've had examples where it's not gone so well. But I fundamentally believe that you should be aiming to deliver something to a day, even if at the start that's a guess. You've got something that you're working towards.
I'd add to that as well. I think the sort of concept of a wrapper would also be, you don't hit the day, or you don't get to the day before the date and not communicate that there is risks and issues that may stop you getting to that date. So I think that wrapper adds the sort of communication layer at the right levels to kind of say, you know, I don't know, a month before, we don't think that we're going to hit this date for these reasons. We can deliver this bit of value now, but, you know, this date will be missed. And to speak candidly, I think if somebody is using agile as a reason to not commit to a date, I'd call BS on that. Because I don't think that it, you know, to your point, I don't think that it's a reason not to have a date in mind, because otherwise it can just kind of go on forever. So I think you definitely need to time box activity.
Ask a follow-up then. So in the business case, how do you sign off the investment in the product? So in a waterfall, so the chap over there talks about waterfall and agile. You have a business case that's predicated on delivering the effort needed to deliver a fixed piece of scope in a fixed time. So when that translates into a project with milestones, if you miss a date, there's a cost associated with that, right? So how do you structure the business case so that you're not doing that? You're not signing off the cost of delivering a fixed scope within a fixed time, but you're signing off the cost of an investment in a product where you can be flexible around the dates.
So I'm trying to change the culture around this right now. So we have a executive change committee where we go through all the squads are delivering, all the projects we've got, and we have this finance slide that comes up that shows every project and what we're spending. And I absolutely hate it. I just think it's completely pointless. Because in my view, if you look across all the people that we've got, if you stop doing some of the projects, you still have 75% of those people there because you need them to support and run what you've got. So it's just wooden money. It just doesn't matter. So what I'm trying to push for is, out of the 20 projects that we've got, there's maybe only 4 of them where actually you're going to capitalise it. You think there's a genuine incremental business case associated with it, and we should be measuring the benefit of that. Everything else, you should be going back to those KPIs, because it's not about monetary value. It's about what are you contributing to the objectives of the firm. So, we're trying to push that change at the minute. And I genuinely believe it's only a handful of things where you've got that traditional business case that says, over 2 years, I'm going to deliver X. I need to spend this much on licensing. I need to grow the team by this. And you need to measure those things. For everything else, if you're going to spend the money anyway, what's the point of measuring it a different way?
Can I add to that? I think people are going to disagree with this, but I'm going to say anyway. Before you get to the point of committing to a business case, you probably would have already spoke to some of those key people that are going to feed into it. So you might have already spoke to product, you might have already spoke to an architect, or that kind of discovery piece as such might have already been done. So it's that classic plus or minus 20% rule, isn't it? You want to under promise, over deliver. But I would like to think, before you've committed to a business case that's got some robust milestones in it that you need to realise a benefit by X, Y, and Z, you've hopefully got that confidence from the key people that are going to drive into that business case. Otherwise, I live and breathe it right now. You're constantly just going to disappoint. And I know sometimes that's not possible because, again, it's a finger in the air, isn't it? We just don't know what that user journey or that product's going to deliver for us. But it's just about having enough up front. And again, back to the communication piece, being honest at the point where you go, this is actually we're not going to hit that. We're not going to do that. And I feel like, as much as I absolutely hate being held to dates, it frustrates the hell out of me. You need something to drive to. You need a purpose. And I think, because if not, it will just go on forever. And you just wait, it's all right, I'll do that next week. So yeah, it's just the way you spin it, I think.
And spent a lot of time writing contracts to be on the hook for delivering these dates commercially. Having an environment where doing discoveries in the right way is encouraged, time boxed, appropriate to the context you're going to do it, but with the right people, with the right skills in there, and the right attitude as well. It's not everybody can do a discovery, but you do need coverage across the roles as well. You need input from delivery, you need analysis, you need architecture, you need developers, you need test. And getting into a rhythm there where you can do that to inform your business case, if you still need to create one, would be the way that I would suggest you do it. Anybody else?
Just going back to the wrapper, project manager wrapper. If there is a project manager, where do they sit? Where should they sit?
I mean,
stools because they're really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You're doing well. Not long now.
My back's in bits, I think.
You stand up.
Bring up my legs, yeah. Again, it's dependent on your definition of a project manager. It can be spun in many ways. Project manager aren't just looking at the engineering element of that roadmap. They're also there for communication, for training, for the marketing side of it. So, for me, the purpose of a delivery manager or delivery lead or a project is very holistic across a business, because, again, and it also depends on people's definition of a product. It'd be interesting to hear this route, but they've got to have that holistic view of how they're managing their stakeholder groups, because they might have 10 different stakeholder groups that they've got to bring on that journey. So the purpose of them, it's a key role to that ratio, I think. So you don't embed them in that process in the right way. You might get project managers that just shy away from the engineering bit because it's not my responsibility, but actually it's their responsibility to deliver a roadmap that an engineering part is part of. So, I think they are really key to the success of what that might be.
Yeah, thanks to the panel. There's been some great insights and shared experiences. And I think one of the things that came up a little bit, I'd like to delve into a bit more, was the agile thing of failing fast and learning even faster. So as it's nearly Halloween, I'd like to ask the panel about their horror stories and what lessons they've learned, really.
How long have you got?
Just over 10 minutes.
I'm quite happy to take on horror stories. I tend to boast about them. So, I mean, the best one we did was new website. Everyone loves a new website. It's going to change the world. Your acquisition is going to go this. Your CPL is going to go through the roof. And I've never done one where my conversion the day after migration was better than the day before. And in one particular instance, we were going to a new paradigm of the React framework. We had 100,000 customers that were using the platform every day. We had 600 drivers doing the deliveries on at night. And we were taking about 5,000 new customers every week as well. And we were like, yeah, this will solve our problems. This will bring our CPLs down. And it absolutely didn't at all. And not only did it not, it stopped people being able to order on the platform as well. So revenue, like it was a subscription-based business. So revenue, 8% of your subscription revenue in a week was actually from people ordering the night before, like just adding stuff to their basket. So no one could add any stuff to their basket for about 3 or 4 days either. It was ruinous almost. And after about 2 weeks, I floated the question that many people float, which is, shall we revert the change? Because there's so many, like CPLs had gone up, by the way, I've missed that point out. Yeah, the whole thing was a shocker. We should have reverted the change. We got it like heavily wrong. Probably in the, it wasn't going to solve the problems that we had. And because we never did, we didn't look at the evidence. The evidence was showing us that it was actually causing attrition in our subscription funnel as well. I kind of knew then that it was time for me to walk away and off into the sunset, shall we say. So that was a particular horror story. I mean, the website is the main, for me, it's always the main one, but please feel free to. I've made some fun.
So nothing as catastrophic as that, but I think there was a site redesign that I was involved with. And at the time, we were also moving to an agile way of doing things. And when I say we, the team sat within the tech team. So tech were doing agile ways of working. The business didn't really know what we were going on about. They just wanted their stuff delivered on a certain day, like we've just talked about. And I think it stands out because we never aligned with our stakeholders on what it meant to deliver agile, and we were trying to do things incrementally, deliver value a little bit quicker, but not in its entirety. And then in terms of the scope of the actual work, what is a redesign? It was so vague, and I think the way that we scoped that out and communicated with the stakeholders, it just wasn't at the right level. So from the very get-go, the methodology that we used and the scope of what we were doing was just way off with our stakeholders. So what ended up happening was we all of the scope that didn't get delivered, we created a little backlog that became this big, and spun up a different project to address that. So I think definitely agreeing that sort of stuff with key stakeholders at the time was where we went wrong. Big retro moment for us, that.
I think for us, so I'm not sure how much people know about interactive investors. So our challenge is you've got customers who are in the stock market, an event happens, they want to sell. If they can't sell, the price moves. It's a big issue. So uptime for us is absolutely critical. But it goes wrong. We try and move as quickly as we can. We try and deliver lots of change. It does go wrong. We have lots of examples of where it goes wrong. But when we do measure the number of incidents that we have, the amount of uptime we've got, those are important measures. But I think what's more important to me and what I measure myself and the team on is how quickly did we spot there was a problem, how quickly were we able to fix it, and did we prevent it from happening again? And I think that third one's the most important, is you have to demonstrate that if you run quickly and you fall over, you don't fall over for the same reason next time around. So I think that's what we use as a measure. We have a specific KPI about repeat incidents. And I think that's probably the most important thing to us. But things regularly go wrong. It's how you learn. I think that's more important.
I'm trying to unpick an example in my head without going against any NDAs, but I think the point what I want to make is that the culture of working in this way is great, but there needs to be limitations and processes and governance in place at the right time for the right reason. I've been sat in a room at 9, 10 o'clock at night working on something for a customer. When you sat in those rooms and the lights start going off because nobody's triggering the sensors anymore, and you've got that really keen technical person who's got a bit of a rebellious streak who just wants to do X, and that's where you've really got to pull down the shutters, take the laptop off them, chuck them out, tell them to go home, because that's when it starts to really unravel really very, very quickly. So it's about making sure everyone knows where the boundaries are and not going all vigilante and rebellious, especially late at night.
But people should also feel safe in making a mistake as well,
Yes.
because with mistakes you get experimentation, with experimentation you get risk, with risk you get rewards, right? So I tell you those stories, like I've got hundreds of others. I've got one particular instance where someone else had made a incredible, so the logistics business, an SEIT had changed all the addresses to one particular address. So that night there was 150,000 milk bottles getting delivered to one address, and he was beside himself, and I took it upon myself. I was like, look, I'll tell him I did it. Don't worry, just don't ever fucking do it again. Was kind of the thing. And we did. They gave me a wooden spoon, an all hands, so I got a wooden spoon for the biggest mistake. But it's like the rest of the team saw that and they knew that they were safe to make a mistake and that it wasn't the be all and end all. And it never is. Even with that, there, all that happened is we rolled the database back an hour. We lost 67 customers that weren't in the 2 files, and that was it. So it sounds like they always sound so big when you make them. You're like, oh, you're living in that moment, but actually, you're one of millions and millions of businesses in the UK. Get over yourself. It's okay. We will fix it. And I think that's the most important thing, because only then are people willing to try.
Right, I think that's a really good place to stop, to be honest. We've got a couple of minutes left. So thank you very much to the panel. Much appreciated for your time today. I think there's probably only a couple of swear words on the recording, so we'll just get Sam to go through it and remove them later on. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you to Interactive Investor for the office space. It's brilliant. Thank you, really appreciate it. And thank you to 4IT for doing all the organising and sponsoring the event as well. It might take us a couple of minutes to get out down the left, so we will finish there. So safe journey home and hope to see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.